Okay, so here we have the half angle identities. We looked at the derivation of most of these in class. We did 1/2 of cosine and sine, and then tangent, of course, is sine over cosine. And then the ones on the right are just where you basically multiply by the conjugate and simplify. So we can kind of see some of the other identities that we've looked at inside of those. So anyway, using these now, let's say that we want to try to find the value of sine of, oh, I'm still in rainbow. Okay, 3 pi over 8. Sorry, I didn't realize I was still in rainbow mode here. All right, sine of 3 pi over 8. Now that's not a value that's on our unit circle, but 3 pi over 4 is. So if we looked at this as sine of 1/2 of 3 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4 is something that we can work with. 1/2 of an angle is something that we can work with. And we're going to use our 1/2 angle identity here. So this is going to be equal to, now it's equal to plus or minus, 3 pi over 8 is in the first quadrant because 3/8 is less than 3/8 is less than 1/2, right? 3/8 is less than 1/2, so it puts us in the first quadrant. So we're going to take the positive root because sine is positive in the first quadrant. Okay, so plugging this in, we're going to have 1 minus cosine 3 pi over 4 over 2. That's all underneath the square root. That's a little bit hard to read. That's 3 pi over 4 there. I'll rewrite it better on the next line. Okay, so we know that 3 pi over 4 is a reference angle of pi over 4 in the second quadrant. Cosine is negative in the second quadrant, so it's going to be negative square root of 2 over 2. All over 2. Okay, so that's going to give us 1 plus the square root of 2 over 2. And if we get a common denominator, that's going to be 2 plus the square root of 2 over 2 all over 2. We got lots of 2's going on here, so be careful with it. All right, and that's going to give us the square root of, okay, so we're going to change this to multiplying by the reciprocal now. We've got 2 plus square root of 2 over 2 times the reciprocal, which would be 1 over 2. Okay, so on top we've got 2 plus the square root of 2, like this. And I'm out of space here, so I'm just going to go ahead and simplify the bottom. The bottom is 4 inside of the square root, so that's going to be 2 outside of the square root. Okay, so our sine should be equal to this. And remember, again, you can put this in your calculator and you can put this in your calculator, and they should be equal. Okay, so now let's try another one. Let's try cosine of pi over 12. Now we did this one as a sum or difference back in the last section. You could also look at it as a half angle problem. So for a lot of these, if it doesn't tell you how to do it, there's a few different ways that you can approach it. So we could say that, well, this is cosine of, I know what pi over 6 is, so I could look at this as half of pi over 6, okay, because that would give me pi over 12. And so I can use the cosine half angle identity. So again, pi over 12 is first quadrant, so I'm going to take the positive root, because I know that this answer is going to come out positive. And when I put it in, I'm going to have 1 plus cosine pi over 6 all over 2. Okay, so I'm taking this angle and putting it in for my A in the cosine identity. All right, now we've got 1 plus, and then cosine pi over 6 is equal to square root of 3 over 2, all over 2. Okay, and we need to simplify this. Okay, so let's come over here. We're going to get the common denominator on top. We've already seen this a few times. So we're going to have 2 plus square root of 3 over 2 all over 2. It's a big radical. Okay, so that's getting a square root, common denominator on top. Now we can change this to multiplying by the reciprocal. So we've got 2 plus square root of 3 over 2. That's our top. And then we're going to multiply by the reciprocal 1/2. Okay, these should start looking familiar when you've done a bunch of them. Okay, so multiplying across the top, we get, actually I'm out of space again, so we're going to get 2 plus square root of 3 on top, okay, times 1, that doesn't change anything. And then on the bottom, we're going to get a 4 inside of the square root, and I'm just going to go ahead and pull that out as a 2 outside of the square root, okay? So this would be like, let me see if I can squeeze it in down here. 2 plus square root of 3 over 4, like that. There we go, I can squeeze it in. Okay, so like that, and then the square root of 4 on the bottom is just going to be a 2. So this will be our final answer right there. Okay, so this is another way to look at one of those pi over 12 kind of problems, is to look at it as a half angle one. Now this isn't going to be the same answer as if you do a double angle one. It's not going to look the same, but if you put them in as decimals, then you should see that the decimals match and it is the same thing.